The Cushing syndrome is caused by excessive activation of glucocorticoid receptors. It's most commonly iatrogenic due to the prolonged administration of synthetic glucocorticoids. In other words, the commonest cause of Cushing syndrome is intake of steroids for some other reasons like prolonged use in rheumatoid arthritis, SLE, other connective tissue disorders, bronchial asthma, and certain other conditions. So, prolonged use of steroids as a therapeutic measure for certain diseases is the most important cause of Cushing syndrome and is the most common cause. The adrenal cortex is divided into three zones, function as two zones practically, zona gluminosa and zona fasciculata reticularis. They produce steroids in response to humoral stimuli. Glucocorticoids, cortisol is the major glucocorticoids in human beings. Levels are highest in the morning on waking and lowest in the middle of the night. Cortisol rises dramatically during periods of stress such as any illness that can be physical or mental. More than 95% of circulating cortisol is bound to protein, principally cortisol binding globulin, which is increased by estrogens. Uh, Two main reasons of Cushing syndrome, that is exogenous, that is exogenous intake of steroids. And second is endogenous, the production of cortisol within the human body. The endogenous Cushing syndrome is two types. One is ACTH dependent and non-ACTH dependent. 80% cases of endogenous Cushing syndrome are ACTH dependent. They're, they're mainly pituitary adenoma that secrete ACTH that occurs in about 70% of cases. This is known as Cushing's disease. Pituitary adenoma that secrete ACTH is known as Cushing's disease. Then ectopic production of ACTH that can be from uterine carcinoid or small cell lung carcinoma, and certain other neuroendocrine disorder. They constitute 10% of the endogenous Cushing syndrome. The second variety is non-ACTH dependent that occurs in 20% of cases. In 15% of cases, the non-ACTH dependent Cushing syndrome is because of adrenal adenoma, and in 5% it is because of adrenal carcinoma. Hypercorticolism due to other causes is also known as pseudo-Cushing syndrome. This occurs in alcohol excess, uh, can lead to biochemical and clinical features. Major depressive illnesses, they have only biochemical features and sometimes clinical overlap. Primary obesity, mild biochemical feature and some clinical overlap. ACTH dependent cases are 80% because of ACTH dependent cases of Cushing syndrome constitute about 80%. And out of them, 70% are because of pituitary adenoma secreting ACTH. This is known as Cushing's disease. Again, some repetition of exercise. The clinical assessment, The clinical manifestations of glucocorticoid excess are variable. Many of these are not specific to Cushing syndrome, and because spontaneous Cushing syndrome is rare, the positive predictive value of any single clinical feature alone is low. Moreover, some common disorders can be confused with Cushing's syndrome because of alteration in the cortisol level, like obesity and depression. What are clinical features? These are hair thinning, hirsutism, that is growth of hairs on the face of female patients, acne, plethoric appearance of the face, moon face because of swelling. These patients can develop peptic ulcer, can also develop hyperglycemia. Cushing syndrome is one of the causes of secondary diabetes mellitus. A patient can have menstrual disturbances. Many have callus with fractures. Then they can have osteoporosis, tendency to infections with poor wound healing, and little inflammatory response, can develop hypertension. Again, Cushing syndrome is one of the causes of secondary hypertension. A patient can have centripetal obesity, striae, wasting, and weakness of the proximal thigh. Muscle bruising, muscles weakness, bruising, loss of height, backache, from the compression of the vertebrae, decreased skin thickness. This shows the typical Cushingoid face. You can see the rounded face, swollen face, and plethoric appearance of the face. Truncal opacity, buffalo hump. Again, shows the striae, the abdomen, typical appearance of face in the Cushing syndrome. This is a buffalo hump, deposition of fat, upper thoracic and lower neck. This is diagrammatic representation of the clinical features in Cushing syndrome, that is upper body obesity, with thin arms and legs, buffalo hump. This is red rounded face, high blood sugar, high blood pressure, vitiligo, blurring of visions, acne, feeble balding, water retention, menstrual irregularities, thin skin and bruising, purple stripe, poor wound healing, hirsutism, hypertension, cognitive difficulties, emotional instability, sleep disorders, and fatigue. It is vital to exclude iatrogenic causes of Cushing syndrome in all patients of Cushing syndrome. Features that favor Cushing syndrome is an obese patient are bruising, myopathy, thin skin. Any clinical suspicion of cortisol excess is best resolved by further investigations. It is vital to exclude iatrogenic cause in all patients with Cushing syndrome, since even inhaled or topical steroids can induce the syndrome in susceptible individuals. So careful drug history must therefore be taken before embarking on complex investigations. Some clinical features are more common in ectopic ACTH syndrome, while ACTH secreting pituitary adenoma or tumors retains some negative feedback sensitivity to cortisol. This is absent in case of tumors. The high ACTH levels are associated with marked pigmentation because of binding of melanocortin 1 receptors or melanocytes in the skin. The high cortisol levels also overcome the capacity of 11 beta hydroxylase to inactivate cortisol in the kidney, causing hypokalemic alkalosis that aggravates myopathy and hyperglycemia by inhibiting insulin secretions. When the tumor that is secreting ACTH is malignant, then the onset is usually rapid and may be associated with cachexia. And for these reasons, the classical features of Cushing syndrome are less common in ectopic ACTH syndrome. If present, they suggest that a less aggressive tumor is there, such as bronchial carcinoid, which is responsible for this. Because the malignant tumors uh, do not give the time to the patient to develop these features. In Cushing disease, the pituitary tumor, usually microadenoma, that is less than 10 millimeter in diameter, and other features of pituitary macroadenoma, that is hypogonadism, visual failure, or disconnection, hypoplactemia are rare. What are the investigations which we advise in these patients? The diagnosis of Cushing syndrome is a two-step process. Number one, to establish whether the patient has Cushing syndrome or not. First step is to establish whether the patient has Cushing syndrome or not. A second, if you diagnose Cushing syndrome, to define or find out its cause. Establishing the presence of Cushing syndrome, uh, first investigation is a failure to suppress serum cortisol with low dose of oral dexamethasone. Loss of the normal circadian rhythm of cortisol with inappropriately elevated late night serum or salivary cortisol. Increased 24-hour urine-free cortisol. Dexamethasone is used for special testing because it does not cause active amino acid for cortisol. An overnight dexamethasone suppression test involves administration of 1 milligram dexamethasone at about 11 p.m. and measurement of the serum cortisol level at 9 a.m. following day. In a low-dose dexamethasone suppression test, the serum cortisol is measured following administration of zero point 0.5 milligram dexamethasone 4 times daily for 48 hours. For either test, a normal response, the serum cortisol level less than 1.8 microgram per deciliter. Once the presence of Cushing syndrome is confirmed, then the measurement of plasma ACTH is the key to establish the differential diagnosis. It is measured best in the morning around 9 a.m. In the presence of excess cortisol secretion, an undetectable ACTH indicates an adrenal cause, while ACTH level more than 3.3 picomole per liter suggests a pituitary causal ectopic ACTH. So I repeat this. In the presence of excess cortisol secretion, an undetectable ACTH level indicates adrenal cause, while ACTH level of less than 3.3 picomole suggests a pituitary cause or ectopic ACTH. ACTH levels in between these values represent gray area, and then further evaluation is required by an endocrinologist. A test to discriminate Pituitary from ectopic sources of ACTH rely on the fact that pituitary tumors, but not the ectopic tumors, retain some regulation of ACTH secretions. So, tests to discriminate pituitary tumor from ectopic sources of ACTH rely on the fact that pituitary tumors, but not the ectopic tumors, retain some regulation of ACTH. Pituitary tumors retain some regulation of the ACTH secretion. Thus, in pituitary-dependent Cushing disease, ACTH secretion is suppressed by high-dose dexamethasone, and ACTH is stimulated by corticotrophin-releasing hormone. In a high-dose dexamethasone suppression test, serum cortisol is measured before and after administration of 2 mg of dexamethasone 4 times daily for 48 hours. Once when these tests confirm the presence of tumor, the next step is the localization of tumors. That's create ACTH for cortisol. The MRI is done, which pursues 60% of cases. In cases of primary microadenomas that secrete ACTH, MRI detects around 60% of pituitary microadenomas secreting ACTH. Then bilateral inferior petrosal sinus sampling with measurement of ACTH is the best means of confirming Cushing disease, unless MRI shows a tumor bigger than 6 mm, in which case it may not be needed. CT scan or MRI detects most adrenal tumors. Adenocarcinomas are usually larger than 5 cm and have other features of malignancy. How to manage these cases? Untreated severe Cushing syndrome has a 50% 5-year mortality. 50% 5-year mortality. Most patients are treated surgically, but medical therapy may be given in severe cases for a few weeks prior to operation to improve the clinical state. A number of drugs are available that inhibit glucocorticoid biosynthesis, including etragonazole and ketoconazole. The dose of these agents is best titrated against serum cortisol levels or 24-hour peak cortisol level. In case of Cushing disease, transsphenoidal surgery carried out by an experienced surgeon is the treatment of choice. In approximately 70% of patients going into immediate remission. Around 20% of patients suffer a recurrence years later, emphasizing the need for lifelong follow-up. Then laparoscopic bilateral adrenalectomy performed by an expert surgeon effectively cures ACTH-dependent Cushing syndrome, but in patients with pituitary-dependent Cushing syndrome, that can lead to Nelson syndrome. In Nelson syndrome, the loss of negative feedback from the endogenous cortisol results in growth of the pituitary tumor, often leading to an invasive pituitary macroadenoma, which causes a local mass effect and very high ACTH level that can cause pigmentation. The risk of Nelson syndrome is reported as being reduced by pituitary irradiation in series, but not all. The somatostatin analog desideriprotide is also licensed for the treatment of Cushing disease and works by suppressing ACTH secretion by the tumors. Desideriprotide has to be administered by twice daily subcutaneous injection and is relatively quite expensive. In case of adrenal tumors, Laparoscopic adrenal surgery is the treatment of choice, and for adrenal adenomas, surgery offers the only prospect of cure for adrenocortical carcinomas. But in general, prognosis is poor, with high rates of recurrence, even in patients with localized disease at presentation. Radiotherapy to tumor bed reduce the risk of local recurrence. Systemic therapy consists of the adrenal-lytic drugs such as metronine and chemotherapy, but responses are quite poor. Ectopic ACTH syndrome, localized tumors such as bronchial carcinoid should be removed surgically. In patients with incurable malignancy, it's important to reduce the severity of the Cushing syndrome by using medical therapy or, if appropriate, bilateral adrenalectomy. Now, hormonal diseases are quite confusing, particularly Cushing syndrome. As an MBBS student, we expect from the student the clinical features, the Cushing syndrome, and the causes. Rest of the things are quite theoretical. We hardly ask such questions in examination. So you should know basically the clinical features of Cushing disease, Cushing syndrome, and differences between Cushing syndrome and Cushing disease, and basic investigations. My next topic for today is pheochromocytoma and paraganglioma. I think you should have a 1 minute break and then I start with this topic. Pheochromocytomas and paragangliomas. These are rare neuroendocrine tumors that may secrete catecholamines, adrenaline, epinephrine, or noradrenaline. Now, approximately 80% of these tumors occur in the adrenal medulla, that is pheochromocytomas, while 20% arise elsewhere in the body in the sympathetic ganglia, paragangliomas, that is outside adrenals. Most are benign, but approximately 10 to 15% can have malignant features. Around 40% are associated with inherited disorders, including neurofibromatosis, von Hippel-Lindau syndrome, MEN2 and MEN3. These will be considered in a separate lecture by Dr. Tahir. Paragangliomas are particularly associated with the mutations in the succinylhydrogenase B, C, and D genes. The main features of pheochromocytoma are because of the increased circulating levels of the catecholamines. So these patients usually present with hypertension. And hypertension is paroxysmal. They usually report with attacks of hypertension. In many attacks, the patient may have normal blood pressure. So when the secretions, the catecholamine secretions increase at some point uh, through the course of the disease, that lead to the hypertension, and that occurs in the form of attacks. Patient can have a paroxysm of pallor, occasionally flushing. They have palpitations because of increased catecholamine levels, sweating, headache, and severe anxiety. Patient can have abdominal pain, vomiting, they can have constipation, weight loss, glucose intolerance. Again, pheochromocytoma is one of the causes of secondary diabetes mellitus, or you can say the hormonal causes of diabetes mellitus. Some patients present with hypertension, although it has been estimated that pheochromocytoma accounts for less than 0.1% cases of hypertension. The presentation may be with the complications of hypertension. Some patients present with hypertension and some patients present with complications of hypertension like stroke, myocardial infarction, left ventricular failure, hypertensive retinopathy, and accelerated phase hypertension. The apparent paradox of postural hypertension between episodes is explained by uh, pressure during a hypertensive episode so that intravascular volume is reduced. There may also be features of the familial syndrome associated with leukocytoma. Paragangliomas are often non-functional. What are the investigations which are advised in such tumors? The excessive secretion of catecholamines can be confirmed by measuring metabolites in the plasma or in the urine, which is metanephrine and normetanephrine. There is a high false positive rate as metanephrine concentrations may also be seen in stressed patients during acute illness or following vigorous exercise or severe pain abdomen and following ingestion of some drugs such as tricyclic antidepressant. So these factors are responsible for the false positive cases, false positive growth in some patients. For this reason, a repeat blood sample should usually be requested if elevated levels are found. Although, as a rule, the higher the concentration of metanephrine, the more likely the diagnosis of pheochromocytoma or paragangliomas. Serum chromatin A is often elevated and may be useful tumor marker in patients with non-secretory tumors or metastatic disease. Genetic testing should be considered in individuals with other features of genetic syndrome, in those with a family history of pheochromocytoma, presenting under the age of 50 years. Or to locate the tumors, that is localization. Pheochromocytomas are usually identified by abdominal CT scan or MRI. Localization of paragangliomas may be more difficult. Then scintigraphy using a meta-iodobenzyl guanidine, that is MIBG scan, can be useful, particularly if combined with CT. For adrenal pheochromocytoma, but is often negative for paragangliomas. So this MIBG scan is more useful to localize the pheochromocytoma rather than the paragangliomas. The natriuretic deoxyglucose PET is especially useful for detection of malignant disease and for confirming an imaging abnormality uh, as a paraganglioma in an individual with underlying risk due to the genetic mutation. Less widely available tests are 68 gallium, Dr. Tate, PET or CT imaging. They are more sensitive for paragangliomas. You see this sketch with this area. There's a tumor here. Again, Again, such you showing MABG scan, MABG scanning, pheochromocytoma. It shows the uptake by the tumors. Another view, MABG scan. What's the management of these tumors? In functioning tumors, medical therapy is required to prepare the patient for the surgery, preferably for a minimum of 6 to 8 weeks to allow restoration of the normal plasma volume. The most important factor in this patient in the management is the preparation of the patient before surgery. It's not the surgical technique that is more important, it's the preparation of the patient before the surgery is undertaken. The most useful drug is the alpha blocker, that is phenoxypenzamine, 10 to 20 milligram orally 3 to 4 times per day, because it is a non-competitive antagonist unlike prazosin. This is better than prazosin because it is non-competitive antagonist. If alpha blocker produces a marked tachycardia, then beta blockers such as propranolol can be added. So one of the side effects of alpha blockade is marked tachycardia. Patient develop tachycardia, then we can add the beta blocker, particularly propranolol, which is non-cardiostatic, to control the heart rate. On no count should a beta blocker be given before an alpha blocker, as this may cause a paradoxical rise in the blood pressure due to the unopposed alpha-mediated vasoconstriction. Now, during surgery, sodium nitroprusside and the short-acting alpha antagonist phentolamine are useful in controlling the hypertensive episodes, which may result from anesthetic induction or tumor mobilization. When surgeon physically mobilize the tumor, then these chemicals are released into the circulation during surgery, and that leads to very high blood pressure. So this should be controlled with sodium nitroprusside. Post-operative hypertension may occur in some cases and require volume expansion, and very occasionally noradrenaline infusion is required. But some commonly the patient has been prepared with peroxybenzodiazepine. This is only required if the patient is not prepared well before the surgery by peroxybenzamine. Metastatic tumors may behave in an aggressive or a very indolent fashion. Management options include debulking surgery to reduce that is to reduce the tumor size, radionuclide therapy with 1311 MIBG chemotherapy, embolization of the hepatic metastasis. Some may respond to tyrosine kinase and angiogenesis inhibitors. This radionuclide therapy is 131 iodine MIBG. But this is all about pheochromocytoma. The only thing is to remember that pheochromocytoma is one of the causes of the episodic blood pressure and is one of the causes of the hypertension, that is treatable hypertension. Now my next three lectures are on diabetes mellitus. These three lectures are important because diabetes is asked in every aspect, that is in MCQs, SCQs, short cases, long cases, mostly everywhere. So three lectures on diabetes to next week and then subsequent week. Any question for these lectures, please? Any question regarding Cushing syndrome or pheochromocytoma? Any questions?